Hello, my name's Paul. I'm from Nirvana, and today I'm very excited to introduce my guest, Clive De Carle. Clive is a health researcher, a health advocate, and many more things. I first came across Clive around about 10 years ago when he first appeared on the UK column, and the information that he gave really blew my mind. And so, hello, Clive. How are you today?
Hello, Paul. I'm great, thank you. Yeah, on fine form.
Brilliant. Okay, so there's so many things I want to talk to you about. So many things. I thought maybe the first thing we could talk about is things that people can do for themselves to improve their health that cost absolutely no money whatsoever. So, would you be able to talk on that subject for us?
Sure.
Great.
If anybody finds that whatever health problem they might have gets worse in winter, then you'd be pretty sure it's a vitamin D deficiency from lack of sun. You know, why do people get colds in the winter? Well, it's usually lack of sunshine. So when I realized this some 15 years ago, I used to get a couple of colds every year. Then I started supplementing with vitamin D just in winter if I wasn't getting any sunshine. And I never got a cold again in the last 15 years, never had one since. That was all it was. You know, for some people, they get, sad, seasonal affective disorder. And it's amazing how powerful vitamin D is, and it's so cheap. I mean, a year's supply is 20 quid, so it's not going to break the bank. Mm-hmm. And the figures are something like the people with the highest vitamin D have something like 70% less cancer. Just that one thing alone is massive, right across the board of health. So other things, maybe 50% of the population are dehydrated, maybe. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty massive. Your brain's made mainly of water, your eyes are made mainly of water. So dehydration really is an issue for a lot of people. But then people say, well, the water tastes horrible. Well, you really have to filter water these days. Water has become a fairly dangerous substance. What else can you do for free? Well, stuff you can do for almost free is a decision, and that decision is, well, let me give you one of my favorite examples. Let's say there's a knock at the door, and you open the door, and there's this beautiful woman carrying a 1-year-old riding a racehorse. And she says, look, I'm really sorry about this, but I've got to do something urgently. Would you mind looking after the racehorse? By the way, the racehorse is worth £20 million. And would you mind looking after the baby? And she's got to do this urgent thing, right? So what are you going to feed the baby and the horse? Well, we might decide that the only thing we've got in the house is oats, and probably the baby and the horse might eat the oats, okay? So how much poison are you going to give the baby? How much poison are you going to add to the oats for the horse? I mean, the answer obviously clearly is none. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that if you are eating steel milled oats from the supermarket that's not organic, it's poisoned. It's poisoned in 2 ways, maybe more. If it's not organic, then the soil will be poisoned, and the insects and all the life under the soil will be almost dead. So there's nothing to produce more minerals. So when harvest time comes, they harvest the grain. What used to happen was they'd then set fire to the field when the stubble was dry and burn it to the ground. Now, you can burn minerals and they're unaffected by it. So every year they burn the stubble down, whether it's oats or wheat or whatever, and they'd remineralize the soil. But back to the baby and the horse. So it is clear that we wouldn't poison a fictitious baby or a fictitious racehorse. We just wouldn't do it. So we have to take a decision to stop poisoning the children, stop poisoning granny, stop poisoning mum, stop poisoning ourselves. We just have to stop supporting an agricultural disaster that is agriculture these days. What's going on is terrible. Now, people say, oh, but organic food is so much more expensive. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. The difference between a loaf of bread and an organic loaf of bread might only be 20p or something. The difference between organic milk and not is, again, a relatively small amount. Clearly some things are massively more expensive. I mean, chickens, for example. You can buy a chicken for, let's say, $3.99, or you could buy one for $9.99 or $13.99, wherever you're shopping, for one that's real. So why is one $3.99, one's $9.99? Well, one of them has been bred hopefully reasonably properly, and one hasn't. I mean, it used to take many, many months for a chicken to grow to the size that you'd want to eat it. But these days, they've scaled that right down to about 12 weeks from start to finish. And doing that, they've changed chickens. The food that they're giving chickens is not what a chicken would eat in the wild. So things have changed so much in the last 5 years, food-wise, in the last 10 years, in the last 50, in the last 100, in the last 150. I mean, back in 1850, they keep records of births and deaths. They've done for a long time. In the city of Boston, in America, 3 people had heart problems, and nobody had cancer. Type 2 diabetes, fibromyalgia hadn't been thought of yet. There were basically no illnesses, essentially. Then, in 1891, they introduced the first cooking oil. People at that point would have used butter or lard or dripping or whatever it was. And they introduced a processed oil, and immediately heart attacks and cancer and so on started happening. And it just went downhill onwards from there.
Yeah, definitely. Getting back to what you were talking about with hydration and water, I recently read in Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride's book that she was saying that you can sometimes overdo that because your body is going through various processes all the time. And sometimes if you're constantly drinking water, it can interfere with those processes. I don't know if you have an insight on that at all.
Well, sure. I mean, as people get older, they create less and less of everything, less hormones, less everything. And one of those big things is less stomach acid. So if you drink a lot of water while you're eating a meal or just before or just afterwards, most people haven't got enough stomach acid. So by drinking water, you're diluting it so that the digestion of proteins, for instance, might be severely curtailed. Right. So maybe that's what she's referring to. But the other factor, of course, is that water is the ultimate solvent. So I was talking to an athlete earlier on who was about 30% down on their performance. We were discussing what it could be. And she was getting muscle pains, which you shouldn't get. Anyway, we worked it out. She was sweating out so much magnesium that she was getting the symptoms of magnesium deficiency.
Yeah, I know that we burn magnesium, don't we, when we're stressed?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can sweat it out,
Yeah.
So if you drink a lot of water, water being the ultimate solvent, it is going to pull some stuff out of you. So, too much water can be a bad thing, but you can drown in water, dangerous stuff.
Yeah, okay. Brilliant, thanks. So would you recommend people eat fermented foods at all? I've been hearing a lot about fermented foods recently. I've just made myself some sauerkraut, so I'm about to try it for the first time. Do you recommend it, and what are the benefits of fermented foods?
Well, our ancestors would have used them for sure, here in Northern Europe, to get through a cold, harsh winter. Maybe in a really bad winter, the ground is frozen for months and months. So how do you get around that? Well, ancestral people generally lived on the coast because no matter what's going on, there's always fish in the sea. By rivers, always, hopefully fish in the river most times a year, perhaps. So how else would you get through a cold winter? Well, you might make cheeses, you might make jams or chutneys, or you might take a ham and hang it up to dry and eat that. You do everything you could to get through a cold winter. Up in sort of Norway, they would ferment fish, and and it would be really smelly and horrible, and most people probably wouldn't want it, but it gave them enough vitamin A, enough vitamin D when there wasn't enough sunshine to get through the winter and not die, not get ill. I mean, my mum used to want to ram cod liver oil down my throat, which is exactly what you need to get through a cold winter in a northern climate.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say at the end of the harvest, there are loads of onions, more than can be eaten or sold. There are loads of cabbages or peppers or tomatoes or whatever. You can pickle anything pretty much. You can pickle anything. It's dead easy to do. You get a glass container, like a kilner jar or something. And as you've discovered making sauerkraut, if you're to make sauerkraut, you chop up the cabbage small. The smaller you chop it, the quicker it ferments. And you might want to add you might want to add some beetroot. You might want to add some onion or garlic or pepper, chilies, or whatever you want, and then just ram it all in the glass jar as tight as you can. Mix up some salt water so that when you're eating the stuff, there's enough salt for it to taste nice. You want to use a real salt, like grey Celtic salt, unprocessed, not bleached sea salt, real sea salt. And let's say you've got some cabbage leaves left over. You just put those at the top of the jar so that all the cabbage you want, all the sauerkraut you want, is under the salted water. Anything above the level of the salt water would go mouldy, anything below will ferment. So you've got this sacrificial thing. So when you close it, you're pushing it down, everything's underwater. Then you leave it in a dark place for a week or so. And by that time, it should have fermented quite nicely. Be careful when you open the lid because pressure will have built up. About the first time I was doing this, some 12 years ago or something, I'd got exactly this beetroot sort of mixture, and I wasn't thinking, and I just opened it. It went pow, and I got covered in it. It was on the ceiling. It was everywhere, right? So
yeah, sure.
Just what some people do is every couple of days they just release the pressure.
Yeah,
so it doesn't build up too much.
Yeah, great. So with fermented foods, I understand that they're like a probiotic factory, pretty much. They're probably the most beneficial food for gut health. Am I right in saying that?
Well, I think that would be true. So, our ancestors up north really would have been eating a lot of fermented foods, obviously. There'd be layers of sort of, mold rind on the cheese and, that's how it goes. So I think we were designed for a certain amount of fermented foods, be it yogurt or whatever it might be. And I think, what happened to me was 35 years ago, I was fit, healthy, no problems. And I took one antibiotic once for some trivial, ridiculous reason. And a few months later, I could no longer walk, couldn't get dressed, I couldn't get out of bed, and they put me in hospital for weeks. And they couldn't work out what was wrong with me. And after many weeks in the observation ward, I was sweating so much I had to change the bed 3 times every night. And, I was dying, basically. And I figured it out myself, what had gone wrong. The antibiotic had damaged lots of the bacteria that was in my gut. And the bacteria in your gut is a major proponent of some digestive functions. And the friendly bacteria are maybe 80-90% of our immune system. Our immune system really is a bunch of bugs in the gut. So the probiotics can fix the damaged bacteria. And who is there out there who maybe hasn't had an antibiotic just once? I had one, and
Wow.
I fell apart.
It's amazing.
Arthritis, type 1 diabetes, eyesight, a million problems from one antibiotic. How long might it take for you to recover from antibiotic poisoning? Well, antibiotic means anti-life. If you take probiotics or probiotic foods like fermented, well, it might be quite quick to get it back. But there are other ways to get them back quicker. There are certain foods you can eat, asparagus being one of them, that turns out that the bacteria in the gut love to eat themselves. Fulvic minerals, Fulvic, fulvic minerals, soil-based mineral extract, also has minerals like yttrium, which you'd never find in a multi-mineral usually. But the soil is a perfect example of the most perfect supplement in the world. Let's say you wanted a supplement for free, as you asked at the beginning. You could go out into the old forest with a bucket and spade, dig down a bit, and the soil there should be untouched, perfect, and the chances are that it is perfect, because everything that's ever lived or died has ended up in the forest floor, every bud, every leaf, every insect, every twig, whatever. So it's like a perfect balance of life. So let's say there's a spring nearby. You could put some spring water in the bucket of earth, stir it up, let it settle, and now the muddy water would be just perfect.
Wow. I might try that, but I might get some strange looks from dog walkers possibly. But
you might. But if they're dog walkers, you might just possibly be too near a beaten track. But the thing is that you can cheat that, because you've probably seen those videos. There's a great one of goats climbing an almost vertical dam because there are minerals that they can lick about 300 foot up, right? And you've seen that.
Yeah.
And they've done that to lick some minerals from the rocks. So there are various places in the world where, for one reason or another, there's this massive concentration of soil minerals. And when I first heard about fulvic minerals, I was reading some Chinese literature, which was explaining how they were reversing cancer and all sorts of things in China using soil-based minerals. So I tried lots of different ones. I didn't feel anything. Then a tiny bottle, much smaller than all the ones I'd tried before, turned up, and literally I felt a different man the next morning. It was really weird, right?
Yeah, it's funny how supplements affect people differently, isn't it? When I first did fulvic minerals, I think I felt sort of a cleansing feeling, but that was about it really. But when I've supplemented with magnesium, the effect on me is quite profound. I just feel so relaxed and just very calm and very, very happy. So they affect us in different ways, don't they?
Well, they do. And magnesium is one that people notice almost every time. I mean, magnesium is number one. You know, if I was to list them in order, magnesium, vitamin C, vitamin D, perhaps would be iodine, would be the top four. So magnesium is ludicrous. It's ludicrous. How many people in the world are low on magnesium? Everybody, pretty much. Pretty much everybody, because it's how we deal with stress, and it's not in the food. It's just missing, totally missing. And people, generally speaking, aren't eating enough vegetables, maybe. Not that, you know, everybody needs a different diet and at different times, but let me run through some of the magnesium deficiency symptoms so that your listeners can see whether they've got one. If you've got one of the symptoms I'm going to read off, speak about, then you might have a magnesium deficiency. So what they include is anxiety, panic attacks, hiccups, headaches, migraines, constipation, heart arrhythmia, restless leg. What else?
Leg cramps?
Leg cramps, any sort of muscle cramp, menstrual cramps, twitches around the eyes. It goes on and on. Any muscle-based. You've got a back issue, it's probably magnesium. You've got a teeth issue, probably magnesium. You've got a bone issue, probably magnesium. If you've got arthritis, magnesium deficiency. It just goes on. So how many of us are low on magnesium? At least 95%.
Yeah.
Now, if you go to the standard high street health store and you buy magnesium, chances are it'll be the wrong type.
Yeah, magnesium oxide, isn't it?
Magnesium oxide is the wrong type.
Yeah, it's not bioavailable for humans, is it really? As I understand it.
Hardly at all, but it's cheaper to buy. And so, you know, that's the one that has the biggest profit margin in for the shops. So avoid magnesium oxide. Now, then let's say you find a good one. I quite like bisglycinate. On my site, I've got a couple of different versions because some are better for unhappiness and depression. You know, I've had people who've gone from suicidal to not in 48 hours, less.
Wow.
Works that quick because it relaxes you. You know,
Mm.
a problem is a stressful thing. A challenge is less stressful. And the difference in one's mental feeling about stuff when you've got the right amounts of magnesium is it's more of a challenge than oh my God, a problem. You know?
Mm.
So how much to take? Well, let's say you get a good version. Most brands will say take 1 or 2, something like that.
Mm.
I suggest that when people are really low, they've got to do their own research on this. Everything I'm saying is not medical advice. It's just a personal opinion. Like, you know, legally I would need to cover myself.
Mm.
And but I often suggest if it's a serious magnesium deficiency that somebody takes 12. Not all at once, because you might end up in the bathroom with diarrhea.
Yeah.
Self-regulating. You can virtually not take too much, because if you take too much, the body says, oh, that's no good. So for people who are constipated, this is fabulously good news, because once you get the balance of magnesium right, you should have a bowel movement after every meal, like normal people do.
Mm.
Not once a day or once every 2 days or whatever.
And you're fairly certain that magnesium is no longer in the food. It's no longer in the leafy green vegetables, or
Well, it probably, well, you know, all the soils have been semi-destroyed. So for a plant to grow, it needs nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. That's all it actually needs. It can get away. I mean, yeah, chlorophyll is basically magnesium. So all plants have magnesium because that's the basis of chlorophyll. However, what I observe is that everybody's low on magnesium. And yeah, maybe we don't blame the green leafy vegetables. Maybe we just blame the stress.
Yeah, I was going to say we all burn we all burn magnesium when we're stressed, don't we? So, and we're all far too stressed these days, most of us. So that would explain that definitely.
Well, exactly. I had somebody the other day in a deep panic attack. They were, for valid reasons, having a panic attack. And I suggested that they immediately concentrated on their breath and tried to slow their breathing down to 4 to 5 breaths a minute. And, it's like when you're stressed or in a panic, you're fast breathing, you're shallow breathing. And so it's something that immediately calms people down. And if one can be aware of one's breathing, then you can calm yourself down. One of the problems is, I'm sitting back in my chair at the moment. You're leaning forward in yours. So if you're sitting upright, you can breathe right in and sort of fill your lungs right up. All you got to do is bend over about 5 degrees, and you can't take in so much air. So what are we all doing most of the day long? We're bending forward, a bit typing. So the being aware of the breathing thing really can be massive. Some people, as you know, breathe through their mouth primarily. And this is a life-shortening thing to do. Can be by years. So if you can breathe through your nose, you want to change the habit of mouth breathing and breathe through your nose instead.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Lots of benefits of breathing through the nose. For one thing, you're filtering out stuff. But there are a whole host of, the body's such a complex thing in a way. You do one thing off, and then a whole host of other things can occur.
Sure.
With that bending 5 degrees forward, you see people all the time walking along, bending forwards. And I want to tell them, look, if you just stood more upright, it feels so much better.
No, I'm very conscious of it now. I've got to try and sit back and sit upright like that.
We've got in habits, and one of the common habits is depression. One of the common habits is fear, worry. And the difference between human beings have a choice of 2 states they can be in. They can be in what the government wants, which is to be in a state of fear, where you look back and it was all horrible, and you look into the future and it looks worse, right? you're in fear. You're worried about stuff. You can't think straight with worry. You're anxious. That kind of approach. That's the fear state, and that's how most people. That's the state most people are in most of the time. Let's say something nice happens. Somebody gives them a hug, or they have a lovely meal, or something. They're probably snapped out of the past and the future and how frightening it is, back into the now. They're having a hug. They're eating a meal, and they're in the now, and they're having a nice time, smile on their face. Everything's fine. That's the love state. It's not that you're in love with the food, not maybe you're in love with the person you're getting hugged from, but the fact is that you've slipped out of the fear state into the love state. And when people can remember that we have two choices of who we are, and I started putting Post-it notes up where I was living saying, is what you're thinking true, or is it an assumption? Because often I was super frightened, I was nervous about stuff that 99% of fear doesn't happen, does it? So I was worrying about stuff that hadn't happened and wasn't going to happen. But in my mind, it was like it was happening right now, oh my God, what am I going to do? So you can't think straight like that. So when you're aware that when you're in the fear state, it's hard to remember what the love state was. When you're in the love state, everything's great. You're thinking, why was I so upset? Why was I so depressed about that? And but how I really noticed this was some 25 years ago. I was in a deep depression period of my life. I didn't know what to do. Everything seemed to be going wrong. It was all ghastly, right? And I'm sitting on the floor feeling really sorry for myself, right? And the phone rings, and it's this incredibly sexy girl, and nothing's going to happen between me and the sexy girl. But in a microsecond, I went from depressed as to elated as in a microsecond. I suddenly thought, bloody hell, if a phone call can do that, I'm out of control. Why can't I do that? And I think this is, everybody probably recognizes a bit of this, that actually we can wallow in self-pity if we choose to. There's a part of us that likes being depressed, that seems to enjoy meeting other depressed people and saying how crappy life is. So avoid the depressed people if you possibly can. And, so my way of looking at it is, don't let anything or anybody upset your nice day.
Definitely.
And then you can carry around a good vibe with you, which hopefully is infectious.
And something else that I've read about that's supposed to be very, very good for depression is amino acids. So, go on.
Well, it can be. I mean, I would think number one for depression is magnesium. Number two is vitamin D. Amino acids could come in a third. So what it appears to be is that maybe a third of us are sort of an addictive personality. And that third of us might have not as many dopamine receptors or the ability to absorb dopamine as the others. So I'm an addictive type person. I can get addicted to anything you like. Whereas some people have, they just don't need the tea or the coffee or the alcohol or whatever it might be, right? So it turns out that for many people, amino acids sort of fill the gap in the brain of where the dopamine ought to be. So the first time I saw this dramatically demonstrated, I learned about it. The first time I actually said to somebody, do it, was this guy. And I watched him get out of the car coming as a consultation. And I'm not sure he's going to make it from the car to the door. He's only about 45 or something. And he explains to me that he doesn't really need to eat food because 4 bottles of white wine give him all the calories he needs.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And he knew that he couldn't continue like that. That was pretty obvious. Anyway, so I said amino acids, and I had 8 months supply of a really high quality blend of amino acids, a really good one. And I said, look, I want you to take a whole bottle every day, a month's worth of amino acids every day.
Wow.
Really? I said, really? And rings me up. He said, the appointment was early in the morning, right? So by the time the next day had come, he's already had one bottle of amino acids. By the time he got home that evening, he said he poured himself a glass of wine, didn't feel like it. 4 bottles of wine a day, didn't feel like it. The next day, apparently, he had 5 meals. 9 days later, he rings me up and says, I've run out of amino acids. And I hadn't ordered any more. I hadn't got any more. He goes back on the booze again.
Oh, dear.
Gets more amino acids, comes off the booze again. And he repeats this cycle about 4 times before he realizes, don't run out of amino acids. And now he's on like a teaspoonful, not a whole bottle full, right?
Yeah.
3 days or so of a high dose of amino acids, and you don't necessarily have to take a whole bottle's worth, And like the blend that I'm selling on my website, that would be more than you need, put it that way. But amino acids not only can, I mean, basically, why would somebody be drinking? Well, probably because they're a bit depressed. So amino acids do loads more than that. One of my assistants in the past was a full-on vegan, mainly raw vegan. Now, vegans are going to be low on amino acids. They're just going to be. You can get amino acids from plant sources, but probably not really enough.
They're not as bioavailable as they are in meat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So on a day when I was with her and she hadn't had amino acids, she was sort of just sluggish. With her, she took an extraordinarily low dose. Most people need more. She had half a teaspoonful of amino acids, and that was it. Like bouncing off the walls with all the energy she needed. It doesn't do that for me. Some people need it, some people don't. But vegans
definitely
can be seriously good. Funnily enough, I had this woman a couple of months ago. I put it on YouTube where you can see it. She rolled up her sleeve and says, "Look," and she's got quite an impressive muscle. And she said, "Look, I've done no exercise. I'm not lifting weights. I started taking the amino acids 1 month ago." Boink. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, crazy. So something else I'd really like to talk to you about today is inclined bed therapy, which involves sleeping with the head end of the bed 6 inches raised off the floor. Is that correct?
Yeah, 5 or 6 inches. So, so your whole bed is on a slant. So your head is higher. And what that does is it raises the arterial blood flow pressure a bit. But by doing that, it reduces the venous return. So the veins are under less pressure. So people who've got varicose veins, all night with that slightly reduced pressure being slightly at an angle, the varicose veins can go down. So that's useful. Anybody with varicose veins, by the way, is probably low on vitamin C. And that's probably the real culprit.
Interesting.
But the inclined bed thing, I mean, I feel more comfortable on an incline. And I noticed it decades ago when I used to go to festivals camping. And I used to like on a field, trying to find a field that was on a slight slope. I quite liked the head being higher than the feet thing. And then, 30 years ago or something, I started blocking the bed up a bit because I felt more comfortable. If you've got something like satin sheets, well, you might slide off. But so all sorts of health benefits. I've got if you put my name in inclined bed onto YouTube, there's a 2-hour video where somebody who knows more about it than I do explains all the research and advantages. So you're doing it. Are you finding it useful?
Yeah, I find it a lot more comfortable, to be quite honest with you. So far so good. I'm married and I share a bed with my wife, and she unfortunately snores horrifically most nights. But the snoring has got better since we've been doing this. So I think that must be something to do with, I don't know, the air circulating in her lungs or whatever. I don't know.
Yes, I don't know. But one of the things you could try is your wife taking magnesium.
Really?
Yeah, take maybe a couple before bed. Some people can take 4 quite happily at one time. 2 is pretty safe. Some people get loose bowels if they take too much vitamin C at one time or too much magnesium at one time. But I mean, if you're relaxed are you going to snore more or less? I would suggest if you're relaxed, you'll snore less. And anybody who's grinding their teeth at night, snoring, anybody who's got sleep apnea, anybody who's having trouble getting to sleep, staying asleep, magnesium might well be the answer. I mean, it's huge. Magnesium is so important.
Would the spray work as effectively as capsules?
No.
Oh, okay.
The spray's all right. And some athletes and so on like it if they've got aching muscles because they haven't taken enough magnesium beforehand.
I was going to say, I used to get leg cramps, and since I've been using the spray, they've gone. So it's definitely...
Okay, so it's raised you up above the level of leg cramps. That doesn't mean that the level is as high as it should be. It might be, but I find the spray is great, and it's magnesium chloride, fantastic way to get magnesium into the body straight through the skin, but it leaves you a bit sticky. And personally, I just take a few magnesium capsules. I can easily take 4, no problem. So I'll just take some magnesium capsules. It's so much easier. And if I'm having a nice day, I might have 4 because that stops muscle cramps and everything seems fine. If I've had a really rough day and tired, anxious, whatever it might be, I might take 8 in one day. I might take 12 if But if somebody's listening to this and they're getting any of the symptoms we've discussed, then building your levels up, you might find yourself quite surprised. Magnesium can often work within 30 seconds. If you're having a muscle cramp, let's say that muscle cramp was going to last 2 minutes, rubbing a bit of magnesium on, it might last half a minute or whatever the change is. So, in the emergency room, if somebody's rushed in having a heart attack, an enlightened emergency room doctor would inject them right away with magnesium, magnesium sulfate, Epsom salts, immediately, wham, straight in. 2 or 3 seconds later, bam, the heart's relaxed. What happens is a heartbeat. One way of looking at it is it's calcium causing contraction, magnesium causing relaxation, and because everybody's low on magnesium, in some cases they get heart arrhythmia, they might get atrial fibrillation, and at the worst case, it's a heart attack. The heart's gone and it's stuck. So there are other forms of magnesium. Of course, magnesium bath is a famous way. Dead Sea salts is magnesium salts, and for thousands of years, people have been bathing in magnesium salts.
Are they superior to Epsom salts in the bath?
Well, slightly different. Epsom salts draw things out. If you got a splinter and you couldn't get it out, it was a nasty one, right? And you mixed up some Epsom salts with a drop of water into a paste, and you put it over the splinter, leave it for 10 or 15 minutes. Magnesium sulfate, Epsom salts, has this drawing effect. So if you're lucky, a little squeeze and out it'll come. So if you have a bath in Epsom salts, it's very detoxifying. Yes, you're getting some magnesium going into the body. But most people have Epsom salts baths as a detoxifying thing.
Right, okay.
Your great-grandmother might have had a Epsom salts foot bath, hot foot bath. Magnesium chloride, magnesium chloride, Dead Sea salts, is more to get magnesium into you. So I remember the first time I ever suggested to somebody that they try a magnesium chloride bath. I suggested they put a kilo of magnesium chloride in the bath and a good soak for 25 minutes. Anyway, this was first thing in the morning. And after she gets out of the bath, she said, that was wonderful. I feel so relaxed. I'm really sorry, I've got no choice. I've got to go back to bed. And I've had people who've said things like, when they take the bath in before bed, which would be more sensible, I've had people say, I've had the best night's sleep in 20 years.
Yeah.
Equally, I've had people take 12 magnesium capsules and say, I've had the best night's sleep in 20 years. I don't want to get people too excited.
Yeah, it's a big thing, isn't it, magnesium?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Reynolds
Are you
syndrome
there?
because for the last, I reckon 15 years now, I've been getting, in the winter when it's very cold outside, I've been getting the tips of my fingers literally turn blue.
You've probably got,
And
it's probably iodine deficiency.
right, okay, that's interesting because I've supplemented with iodine before. When I first started supplementing with iodine, I drank 2 drops in water fairly regularly. Then I found out that could be a problem for gut flora. So then I started painting it on my skin. And I think I'm right in saying that 1 drop in water, the equivalent is 4 drops on skin. Yeah. Is that right?
Maybe 6 or even 8.
Really? Okay. So I've been painting when I have done iodine, when I remember, I do it 8 drops on my skin. So you think if I've got the Reynolds, then I'm probably best off doing more than that.
Well, it depends. I mean, the chances are that magnesium deficiency may be the cause of the Raynaud's. It could be. So I'd up the magnesium first. I mean, do you get cold hands and feet generally?
I would say generally, up until very recently, no, but I have noticed it. Cold feet, so quite possibly. And I remember you said about elbows. Is it red patches on elbows?
Or dry skin?
So
Have you got dry skin?
it's fairly smooth, but it is a bit red.
I see.
So yeah, so it's been a mystery to me, really. I've tried to research it and tried to find out, what causes Raynaud's. I think.
Well, I mean, there are a number of things. Vitamins, a number of things can cause Raynaud's. Vitamin C deficiency, B deficiency, selenium, vitamin D, and anything that happens in winter, you've got to suspect vitamin D as part of the problem. Vitamin E, vitamin zinc. But I mean, the remedies, if you went to a herbalist, they'd recommend things like cayenne pepper. They'd recommend things like lemon water. They'd recommend things like ginger. What else? Apple cider vinegar. Half an hour before a meal, try 2 tablespoonfuls of apple cider vinegar. Anybody who's got bloating or acid reflux or anything, it's not enough stomach acid. So, Raynaud's, they're these classic things that it could be, but probably it's maybe to do with what you're eating. What do you eat?
What do I eat? So I usually have duck eggs in the mornings for breakfast with sourdough bread. I'm not a big eater. I have a main meal in the evening, which is normally meat or fish, usually meat with salad. And other than that, I just, pick at things occasionally, have a little bit of fruit. I've got 2 allotments. So at the moment I'm eating the berries. They're just starting to fruit. So I don't think my diet's bad. I try to avoid processed foods like the plague. Yeah. So
maybe magnesium.
Right. I've been using the spray quite regularly, but I've never actually used capsules. So maybe that's the next thing.
So how many squirts of spray would you use?
I concentrate on my legs because I was getting leg cramps. So I always make sure I'm very generous with the spraying on my legs. And then usually up under my arms. And that's really probably about it, actually.
Okay. Well, so if you're just doing that once a day, the chances are that it really isn't enough. Great, it's fixing the leg cramps, but you can go further, I would suggest.
Right, okay. So, yeah, I'll definitely look into that. And iodine is something that we've not really delved into too much. And I wanted to talk about this because recently I spoke to a lady and I was telling her that, the best thing for the thyroid is iodine, as far as I understand it. And she told me that she has Hashimoto's and that her doctor has said that iodine is not a good idea. So that confused me a bit because every time I've researched it myself, iodine is the thing that makes the hormones in the thyroid, isn't it?
Iodine is the basis of all our hormones, along with cholesterol. The highest concentration of iodine in the body is the thyroid, and everybody's got a thyroid issue you can almost guarantee will have a deficiency of iodine. In women, the second most common part of the body for iodine is the breasts. And there's a huge link between breast health and iodine. Remember that almost everything like this has a bearing in what people are eating. Some people have developed certain intolerances to the modern foods. But I would say that whenever the thyroid is involved, it's worth assuming that iodine may be a very useful remedy. And doctors used to use iodine all the time. I mean, all the time. But again, magnesium deficiency may be a huge part of Hashimoto's. But following, as you suggested, Natasha Campbell McBride's diet, that could be a good thing. Again, amino acids can play an important role there as well. Selenium. If people are doing selenium, they should also be using. Anybody using iodine rather should also be using selenium as well. You can get selenium in Brazil nuts and stuff. But supplementing might be useful. So if you want to know if you've got iodine deficiency symptoms, they probably would include dry skin. If you, compared to, let's say, a few years ago, you walk in a room and you can't remember why you walked in, if your memory is failing, probably an iodine deficiency. If you get cold hands and feet, probably iodine deficiency. If your temperature is high, getting hot flushes, women getting hot flushes at menopause, iodine deficiency.
So brain fog. Brain fog. Yeah. So if people are experiencing one or more of these symptoms, and it's pretty clear that there's an iodine deficiency going on, painting 8 drops on the skin once a day, is that going to be enough, do you think? Or do you think
no,
above that?
Nowhere near. What I would suggest, I've got a video called Clive De Carle Supplements, What to Take, How Often and How Much, something like that. And it's very important, particularly I think with iodine, that everybody needs to grasp that just like magnesium and vitamin C, the chances are that everybody's low on it, 95% plus. In America, where they've actually done tests, really big tests, it's about 96% low. And in England, I've tested several thousand people, and the same sort of figures. Almost everybody's low on iodine, one way or another. Because they're eating bread products that have got flour improver, which is bromine, which knocks out your iodine. Bathing in chlorinated water, drinking chlorinated water, cooking in it. Fluoride, toothpaste, fluoride, water, swimming in a chlorinated pool, all those things knock your iodine levels down. And it's so important, if a woman gives birth to a baby with low iodine, the mum's got low iodine, the baby will have a low IQ. If the woman is chronically, acutely deficient in iodine, then it's brain damage. The child is born a cretin. Cretinism is low iodine. So, anybody who wants to have a healthy, intelligent baby, magnesium, vitamin C, iodine, a number of other things can make the difference that can be vast in how happy, healthy the child's going to be.
Great. Okay, so the last thing I'd like to ask you, Clive, is something a bit out of the ordinary, because you've never really, not that I've noticed anyway, discussed how important exercise is. I'm asking you this because recently I decided to take up cycling. So I've been on my bike every day, and I do consider myself generally to be pretty healthy. and I do a little bit of walking. I go over my allotment and garden and stuff like that. But I got halfway up the road on my bike and nearly died. So how important do you think? I remember that when I actually woke up to nutrition, the one person that I sort of heard speak before yourself was Dr. Joel Wallach.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, and I remember him talking about how couch potatoes live longer on average than athletes, which really like sort of bamboozled my mind at the time. And I'm not sure that's 100% correct, but how much emphasis do you put on exercise yourself?
Well, there are two groups of people who tend to die younger than others, and they are medical doctors and very high performance athletes.
Mm.
One of the reasons athletes tend to drop dead of heart attacks sometimes at the end of a race or something is they've sweated out all the magnesium, as we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
But if you don't use it, you lose it, don't you?
Mm.
And this is the same with eye muscles. Whichever muscle you're talking about, if you don't exercise it, you tend to get weaker. And as a physically lazy person, I'm aware that if I want to keep strong, I've got to exercise. But on top of that, must be, I don't know, 13, 14, some years ago, when I was researching cancer survival, I wanted to know what people who survived did. And it did seem that without the exercise component, recovery was way more difficult. I was pretty convinced from the evidence that you want to be fit and healthy. Exercise is an important part. Now, I mean, walking is exercise. There are so many people who wake up when the clock radio goes off in the morning or something, and all day long there is no silence in their life. So if you're lucky enough to have some countryside to walk in, for instance, everybody knows, I think, that meditation can be a good thing. So walking meditation, if you can get out in the sunshine, if you can walk barefoot on wet grass or whatever it is, it wasn't that long ago where our ancestors were probably outside most of the day, just walking about, hunting animals, fishing, looking for berries and nice things to eat. I think we would have done a lot of walking in the sunshine, and that's free as well.
Definitely. Okay. Well, thanks for that, Clive. That's very interesting, and I'll keep up the cycling. And hopefully we can do this again very soon in the near future.
Yeah, brilliant. Love to.
Thanks. Cheers, Clive. Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.